Have you ever stopped to think about how a company can make a promise today and guarantee they'll keep it 50 years from now? And I'm not talking about a simple product warranty. We're talking about the huge financial promises that things like our pensions and life insurance are built on. So let's pull back the curtain on this incredible world of pricing the future.
I mean, really think about it. Imagine a 25-year-old buying a life insurance policy. That company is making a promise to pay out whether it's 5 years from now or 60. How on earth do you even begin to calculate the right price for a promise that stretches that far into the future? A future full of economic booms and busts, market crashes, and all sorts of changes we can't even imagine yet. At the end of the day, the entire challenge boils down to this one idea. It's about taming uncertainty. It's about looking into a very, very cloudy crystal ball and somehow building a financial structure that won't collapse no matter what the future throws at it. So, who are the people brave enough to do this?
Well, we're talking about a special kind of professional. These aren't people who just try to predict the future. They actually design the financial blueprints to withstand it. You could almost call them the architects of our financial security.
And they have a name, the actuary. An actuary's job is to be a professional realist about what's to come. They use this powerful blend of math, statistics, and financial theory to put a price tag on risk and build a solid framework around those really long-term promises. And here's the thing, without actuaries, the retirement and insurance products that millions of us count on, they just couldn't exist in any kind of stable, reliable way. Actuaries provide the confidence needed for a company to even make a 50-year promise in the first place. But how do they do it?
Well, it's not like they just make a single prediction and then cross their fingers and hope for the best. Nope. They use a dynamic, continuous process, basically a feedback loop for wrangling risk, and it's called the actuarial control cycle.
Now, the key word here is cycle. This isn't a straight line. As you can see, it's a loop. It's constantly in motion, always taking in new information and adapting to a world that's always changing. It's designed to be flexible, not rigid.
So here's how it works, broken down into 4 steps. First, you define the specific problem you're trying to solve. Then, you develop a solution, let's say a new insurance product. But here's the most important part. You then have to monitor how it's actually doing out in the real world. And finally, based on that real-world data, you adapt and you refine your original model. It's that constant loop of monitoring and refining that makes the whole system so robust over decades.
So, how does this cycle actually help put a price on risk? Well, it all starts with understanding a fundamental truth. Not all risks are created equal. And because they're different, you can't treat them or price them the same way.
Actuaries basically split risk into 2 main flavors. First, you have systematic risk. This is the big stuff that affects everybody. Think a global recession or a major market crash. You can't just get rid of it by diversifying. Then you have diversifiable risk. This is much more specific, like a single company having a bad year. And that you can manage by, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
And you can see how these different risks directly connect to products we all know. Mortality risk, that's the heart and soul of life insurance. Inflation risk, absolutely critical for pensions. And market risk, well, that hits all our investments. But here's the tricky part. These risks don't happen in isolation, right? A recession could impact inflation and market returns at the same time. To model how all these interconnected variables might play out over 50 years, actuaries use incredibly powerful tools called economic scenario generators, or ESGs. These are complex simulators that run thousands of possible economic futures to really stress test those long-term promises.
Okay, but this brings up a really important question. You can't just slap an insurance label on any problem out there. So what are the ground rules? What actually makes a risk insurable?
Turns out there's a pretty clear checklist. The loss has to be something you can actually measure in financial terms. You need a large group of people sharing a similar risk, and the chance of it happening to any one person has to be pretty small. That's the whole idea of pooling risk. And crucially, you have to minimize what's called moral hazard. That's the danger that people might act more recklessly just because they know they're covered.
So this entire framework has served us really well for a long, long time. But the thing is, the nature of uncertainty itself is changing. The world is getting a lot more complex, and so are the risks we face.
And that really brings us to the most important takeaway of all. Managing risk isn't just a defensive game of avoiding bad outcomes. When you do it right, when you properly price and structure risk, you actually create the stability and opportunity for all of us to build a more secure future.
And ultimately, that's what this is all about. All the complex math, all the sophisticated models, it all funnels down to one thing:
providing a stable foundation for the financial products that let us save for retirement, protect our families, and manage the great what-ifs of life.
Which leaves us with a really critical question for the years ahead. As the very nature of risk evolves, think about huge systemic challenges like climate change or global cyber threats. Our models have to evolve too. How must the tools we rely on, those economic scenario generators, change and adapt to help us navigate a future where uncertainty itself seems to be changing the rules?